Unbelievable new pictures just released tonight. A crew on the streets of New York captures the first plane slamming into the World Trade Center. And our closest look yet at a hijacked airliner crashing into the second tower. The horror of what happened is just sinking in. Tonight, people gather in churches, praying for those who lost so much and for the strength to go on. And good evening again. Steve Rabel with Susan Hutchison. We continue monitoring CBS, CNN, and all our sources still pouring information into the KIRO 7 Eyewitness Newsroom.
And we also want to show you what we've uncovered tonight happening in the Northwest, where the shockwaves from the terrorist attack on America continue to hit.
Tonight, even as crews dig through the rubble in New York City, we get staggering news on death tolls. They won't even make an estimate at the World Trade Center.
But they think 800 may have died at the Pentagon, where another plane hit, and 266 more are dead on the 4 hijacked jets, apparently used as flying missiles.
And in the rubble in New York, some 378 police and firefighters are missing tonight.
KIRO 7 Eyewitness News reporter Margot Kim has the jarring new information and video coming out tonight on this attack on America.
Susan, the first pictures of this outright assault on the United States were shocking enough. But we now have a new glimpse of the horror that gripped this nation, but as President Bush says, will not defeat it.
For the first time, we see the first devastating assault on the North Tower of the World Trade Center at 8:45 this morning, as terrorists use Americans on board a plane to kill scores of other Americans. Then 21 minutes later, from this incredible angle, stunned onlookers witnessed the second crash of a United Airlines flight, slicing into the South Tower. As the buildings erupt in fireballs, many panicked workers in the towers choose a desperate way out.
I'm seeing bodies falling out of the building. I feel for the families.
Immediately, emergency crews rush into the towers to evacuate. But minutes later, both survivors and rescuers are caught in the building's stunning collapse. The first one tumbling down in a hail of debris.
Top floors collapsed down.
Then the second one rolling down in a thick black smoke. People filling the streets, running from the impending debris cloud. The anguish apparent on every face. But the devastation continues, with another 42-story World Trade Center building collapsing. But by then, the building and area had been evacuated. Stunned survivors walk out of the rubble covered in dust. But while New York reels from its own horror, another one was unfolding in the nation's capital. Another hijacked American Airlines flight crashes into the Pentagon. Tonight, some 15 hours later, the building is still burning. Back in New York tonight, there is no rest for fire crews and rescuers as they continue to search for survivors.
But in fact, New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani says there has been communication with survivors in all that rubble. A sheer miracle on this day of horror. Susan, back to you.
Margaret, we'll have more on that in just a moment. But first, both airlines whose planes were involved in today's attack have set up these information lines for family and friends with questions about loved ones on board those doomed flights. The number for American Airlines, as you see, 1-800-245-0999. And for information on United Airlines passengers, it's another 1-800 number, 932-8555.
After all of that destruction and devastation, imagine this. We have learned that survivors buried in the rubble of the World Trade Center have called family here in Seattle tonight. The mayor and the police in New York say at least 2 different people trapped in all that rubble made calls to relatives in Seattle in the past several hours. The 2 victims underneath a mountain of steel, concrete, and glass were pleading for help, saying there are other people alive with them, including police officers. Relatives then called police in New York. The biggest problem? Rescuers at this hour still don't know exactly where those people are located. And caught right in the middle of the chaos, a doctor with a video camera.
I hope I live. I hope I live. It's coming down on me. Here it comes. I'm getting behind a car. It's incredible. Okay, I had to go find people who need help. I don't think I'm one of them. Needs help.
Dr. Mark Heath keeps his video camera rolling as he searches what looks like a war zone for survivors of this terrorist attack. Coming up a bit later in this newscast, his amazing tour through what looks more like a war zone than Manhattan.
Around Western Washington tonight, churches open their doors and people open their hearts, remembering the victims and their families. KIRO 7 Eyewitness News reporter Ray Lane is live in Seattle with that story.
Susan, it is a night of prayers, tears, agony, anguish, sadness, so many emotions after something so horrific. One of our nation's most beautiful songs, helping to rejuvenate the spirit of so many on this ugly, horrible day. A night at churches of praying, pondering, trying to make peace with such overwhelming disaster.
I think it's a black day for our country. Clearly it's going to change the world for my children and my grandchildren. It'll never be the same.
A tragic Tuesday, the shock of it all still hanging on people's faces.
Pretty upset when I saw the news this morning. Couldn't go to work, couldn't think straight.
We shall overcome.
In the heart of downtown Seattle, Westlake Center Park, a place where so many rallies and vigils have been held before, but none on the heels of such a catastrophe.
I don't feel vengeance. I think if anything, it's sadness. You know that. That I don't think there's anything that anybody or any group of people could do that would justify what happened.
Many here hoping peace will prevail over more violence and potential bloodshed.
The problems that this basically comes out of will not be solved overnight, and they will not be solved by additional bombings either. It's a long road. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot more work than actually bombing another country to try to fix it.
A nation stunned and rattled, its spirit bruised and battered, but not broken. A day none of us will ever forget. The doors here at St. Mark's Episcopal Cathedral Church still open tonight. We will assume that a lot of churches' doors will be open once again tomorrow. Live in Seattle tonight, Ray Lane, KIRO 7 Eyewitness News.
And we've already learned of an extraordinary number of vigils that are set for tomorrow. Later in this program, we'll have the list for the ones that are nearest you.
Well, all day and throughout the evening, our region, the horror of what happened is still sinking in. KIRO 7 Eyewitness News reporter Deborah Horn is live at the Space Needle now with that part of our in-depth coverage. Debbie?
Steve, it is eerily quiet here at the Space Needle, as it has been this very long day. Like the rest of America, people here have been looking for ways to express their grief. In this city, on whose proud symbol a flag flies at half-staff, illuminated by the legacy light, the horror of what happened on the other side of this country is still sinking in.
It's very sad that this whole thing had to come today, but it just shows how the American people, how we feel.
Many found solace here at West Seattle's replica of the Statue of Liberty, a spontaneous memorial to those who died.
It was such a tragedy, so many people lost.
Shiver Bray's parents are FEMA workers on their way to a devastated New York to help.
They're on my mind because they're trying to think of the words that they're going to say to comfort these people.
There was little comfort on these Seattle streets, empty at what should have been the height of rush hour. No comfort still in the headlines that screamed the horrible news of this day.
I'm dumbfounded. I just hope we don't retaliate right away.
As far as I'm concerned, this is worse than Pearl Harbor. This is like an attack in the U.S. So if they find the country involved with it, I personally think we should go to war.
These are different. These are other flags, but all my American flags are sold.
Flags and gas masks. Both were flying off store shelves.
Are you surprised?
Kind of, yeah. Flags I can understand. Gas masks, not really.
Well, no matter for any of us alive on this day, we won't likely forget what happened. Reporting live in Seattle, Deborah Horn, KIRO 7 Eyewitness News.
The president is urging people to pray for those who are grieving, for those whose safety and security has been shattered.
These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. But they have failed. Our country is strong. A great people has been moved to defend a great nation. Our first priority is to get help to those who have been injured and to take every precaution to protect our citizens at home and around the world from further attacks.
The president said we will never forget what happened today, but that we must go forward together to defend freedom and help those who are hurting.
Today, our nation saw evil, the very worst of human nature, and we responded with the best of America, with the daring of our rescue workers, with the caring for strangers and neighbors who came to give blood and help in any way they could.
Even before the speech, people were lining up in Seattle ready to donate blood to do what they could to help.
Indeed, inside local blood banks, people waited for hours to donate. Despite the crowds, people kept coming. Some have friends in New York. Others were just moved by the haunting images they saw on television, including a group of sorority sisters.
And then I heard the call out in Seattle, and a girl paged over our house, was like, anyone want to go? And we all raced down the stairs and headed out.
Blood bank officials say despite today's crowds, more donors will be needed, especially type O positive, O negative, even more so in the next week. Excuse me. But if you want to donate, officials ask that you call ahead, and here's the number to call: 1-800-DONATE-1. Again, that's 1-800-DONATE-1.
Tonight, thousands of passengers still don't know when they'll be able to fly out of SeaTac Airport, which is still shut down tonight. KIRO 7 Eyewitness News reporter Nicole Rodriguez is there live. And even though it reopens in the morning, what are they going to do with all the stranded passengers that are there tonight?
Well, Susan, some passengers are still here, set up at a shelter, while others just got a hotel room nearby, and some sought shelter at a nearby church. Now, this is what it's been like here all day: emptiness. But airport officials are gearing up for a hectic day tomorrow. SeaTac security is at the highest level, and air traffic will be starting up after being at a total standstill. Emergency shelters are in place for stranded passengers. At SeaTac Airport, all 50 cots are taken for the night. Bobby Parvisi says he has a long wait until he can get back home to Sweden.
I could take the flight from Seattle the Sunday.
While passengers rest up for what appears to be a long, nerve-wracking time, airport officials are on the highest alert, level 4 security.
This has not been imposed since the Gulf War about 10 years ago.
What does this mean for passengers? You'll have to arrive 2 hours prior to your departure time. There will be no curbside check-in. Only ticketed passengers will be allowed through the checkpoints, and those passengers will be screened again right before takeoff. Also, all carry-on luggage is subject to search. How long do you think this will stay in place?
Several days. It may even be several weeks.
Even so, some passengers and airport employees are questioning their safety.
I'm sure they'll get it all under control, at least I hope, and we'll be safe when we finally get to fly.
What's going to be next? Schools, office buildings. You know, we got to get a grip of what's going on.
Now, altogether, 114 passenger planes and 19 cargo planes have been grounded. Now, FAA officials say that everything can start running again at around 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, our time, Pacific time, but officials here say expect delays. Anyone traveling should call their airlines. Reporting live at SeaTac Airport, Nicole Rodriguez, KIRO 7 Eyewitness News.
Nicole, thanks. It wasn't just traffic in the air that shut down. As a precaution, ferry commuters nearly came to a halt after cars were banned from state ferries. As a security precaution, the Coast Guard urged state ferries to close to cars, allowing only walk-ons and bicycles. Passengers from 9 o'clock this morning until just before 3 this afternoon were not allowed to take those vehicles on board. Cars were checked by State Patrol troopers and local authorities before being allowed on the vessel.
Nobody could really tell whether or not it was going to be just an East Coast or West Coast, and you know, anytime something like this happens, you really have to be safe.
This was the first massive shutdown of car service on our state ferries in the 50 years Puget Sound ferries have been in operation.
As Margot Kim told us at the top of this newscast, there are survivors buried in the rubble, and rescuers are working frantically right now to reach them. Pretty soon they're going to have some help. KIRO 7 Eyewitness News reporter Kevin McCarty is live at McCord Air Force Base, where search and rescue crews are preparing to go east.
Susan, on this base tonight, there are firefighters from across the Pacific Northwest, from Auburn, from Kent, Tukwila, Puyallup, Seattle, Bellevue, and many others. They're all specially trained in search and rescue, and right now they are preparing for a trip across the country to face the challenge and the horror following that attack on New York. Working under lights, search and rescue crews prepare for a flight east and the task of digging through the rubble of the World Trade Center.
I'm sure there's a loss of life, not only of citizens, but the emergency workers in New York. It's got to be a devastating feeling for them to try and, it's just an uphill battle to try and deal with all this at once.
Nearly 24 Seattle firefighters pack and prepare for the trip. They are among the 60 members of the Urban Search and Rescue Team, specially trained for missions like this. These team members have joined rescues in Oklahoma City and in California earthquakes, but they admit they never thought they'd see an event like this.
There were I'm sure a lot of firefighters that were in that building when it went down. There will be a lot of us going to some funerals.
After hours of empty skies, an AWACS plane lifts off from McCord. The plane, packed with radar and sophisticated electronics, was soon joined by an E-6 surveillance jet. Where they were going and why, the Air Force refuses to say. McCord was shut down tight throughout the day. Security police in armored vehicles cruising the flight line, and airmen riding ATVs brandishing automatic rifles. Many here say they are ready for war, if it comes to that.
That's our job. If you're not willing to be activated, you shouldn't be a reservist. Yeah, it's going to cause havoc because I own my own business, but you know, the people back here will take care of that.
One result of the high level of security at McCord today is that the Air Force is not saying anything about what's going on base. They will only say that security is extremely tight, that all flights except those that are very necessary have been grounded. So we do not know when that crew is going to leave for back east or what role the Air Force may play following these attacks. Reporting live at McCord Air Force Base, Kevin McCarty, KIRO 7 Eyewitness News.
Kevin McCord and the rest of the area's military bases are on Delta Security Alert. That is the highest alert status, and at Whidbey Island Naval Air Station, that meant shutting the main gates and pulling out heavy yellow barriers. Soldiers carried weapons from car to car with pointed questions, turning away all non-essential personnel. Hours after the crackdown begins, sudden activity erupts at one of the airfields as one and then another EA-6B Prowler takes off into the sky. The mission, a total secret. Military around the world is on high alert as well tonight. Members of the Air Force wondering what their status is this evening, if they should report to duty, and where. Well, here is a number for Air Force personnel to call, 1-800-558-1404. Again, for Air Force personnel, 1-800-558-1404.
Now, this high alert triggers action on the water as well, and you saw it live earlier in our coverage as ships were ordered to leave Everett's home port. Our Everett City Cam catches one of 3 naval vessels leaving port into the Puget Sound. They've taken positions around Whidbey Island and in Elliott Bay, and we're told part of their mission includes watching the sky for aircraft. A 25-mile no-fly zone was established around the nuclear submarine base at Bangor. The Delta Security Alert there had soldiers searching cars before being allowed in through the main gates. Bomb-sniffing dogs are also on hand. The nuclear subs based at Bangor play a key role in the nation's strategic defense and could be considered a tempting target.
Thousands of Seattle tourists were caught by surprise when the Space Needle shut down as a security precaution. The Needle, along with the Experience Music Project, Intimon Theater, and the Fun Forest, all closed despite no specific threats to the area. Entrances were cordoned off and barricades blocked the entrance to the Needle. The closure caught a lot of visitors by surprise.
Well, just kind of stunned, so shocked. It's, can't imagine something like that happening.
The Space Needle, along with the rest of the Seattle Center, plans to reopen tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock.
The Mariners and all of Major League Baseball had their games canceled tonight, and the early word from the baseball commissioner's office is tomorrow's games are likely to be canceled as well. In football, this Saturday's Husky game in Miami has also been postponed. No word yet on any makeup dates for those games. The NFL has yet to announce what it will do, although the league is expected to make a decision in the next 48 hours.
Tonight, we learn new details about what went on inside the planes and who investigators believe is behind these terrorist acts. KIRO 7 Eyewitness News reporter Brian Wood is digging into that for us tonight. Brian.
And Steve, we've learned frightening details about what happened on board these flights before they crashed, and the links to an all too familiar name, Saudi terrorist mastermind Osama bin Laden. Before crashing, victims on the planes were able to call on cell phones, reporting teams of 3 to 5 hijackers taking over, using knives, stabbing stewardesses, and commandeering the planes. And after the attacks, U.S. intelligence agencies intercepted communications from people associated with Osama bin Laden, acknowledging targets were hit. That's what Senator Orrin Hatch says he's been told. Also, that information from the plane's manifests link one person to bin Laden's group. This has investigators tonight reportedly executing search warrants at several locations in Florida. Osama bin Laden is a wealthy Arab believed to be living in Afghanistan who's been tied to previous terrorist attacks against Americans.
There are people, there are elements in most countries that do hate America that much. And
University of Washington professor Bob Burrows is an expert on Islamic fundamentalism and has followed bin Laden's trail. In 1998, suicide bombers claiming to work for bin Laden blew up embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. 220 people were killed. In 1999, terrorist Ahmad Rassam was allegedly working for bin Laden when he was caught in Port Angeles trying to bring explosives in from Canada. And in October of last year, bin Laden's group claimed responsibility for that deadly attack on the USS Cole. And tonight, the Boston Herald newspaper reports that police seized a car today at Logan Airport that contained Arabic language flight training manuals. That newspaper also says 5 Arab men had been identified as suspects, including a trained pilot. Reporting live in the newsroom, Brian Wood, KIRO 7 Eyewitness News.
Brian, thank you. As the FBI continues to track new leads in this heinous crime, they have opened up a hotline for anyone to call anonymously with information. The number there, 1-866-483-5137. You can also find this information on our website at KIROTV.com.
Well, the list of questions about these attacks is growing as it has all day long. Our KIRO 7 Eyewitness News aviation reporter Rick Price has been following this story for some 15 hours now, and we appreciate that he's still on board with us tonight. And Rick, first let's talk about what we do know about knives and box cutters possibly being the weapons that these hijackers used. What do we know about that?
Well, you're probably asking how they could have gotten them through security, and here's one answer. This is my trusty Swiss Army knife, and this has been with me on just about every flight that I've made over the last 5 years or so since I've had it. You toss it in a little tray, you walk through the metal detector, you pick it up on the other side, and you're off to your flight. I bet you that won't happen after today.
Job. A number of people have suggested that this was such a complex operation and it was so successful they had to have help from the inside.
Well, it is absolutely a big operation. At least a dozen people on these planes, maybe as many as 20, probably even more help overseas to plan to get those people in place. Anything that big is likely to leak information at some point, and that will help the investigators as they work on it.
And the theory that the hijackers actually were trained pilots.
Well, we know that at least on one plane, the hijackers turned off a radar beacon called the transponder. We have some radar images from the internet that we picked up earlier. This, American Airlines Flight 11, this is its trace, was one of those planes right at the very end. The hijacker who was flying it apparently turned it off. And those planes were flown at the end with great precision. Look at this, a direct hit on the World Trade Center tower. Both of them direct hits. They were not just winged. Now, this was the kind of operation that probably required many rehearsals, and I wouldn't be too surprised if it turned out that some unnamed airline had its 757 or 767 simulator used to run these attacks until they felt they had it down.
That's right. All those hijacked planes were Boeing jets. Rick Price, thank you.
It will certainly be a long time before we know the names of all the victims, but among the few people confirmed killed in this disaster are several who are fairly prominent. They were on the planes. They include executive producer of the hit TV show Frasier. 54-year-old David Angell was aboard an American Airlines jet. And on a United flight, 2 scouts for the Los Angeles Kings hockey team, Garnet Ace Bailey and Mark Bavis. Again, these are just a few of the victims who have been identified.
Today, in the midst of the smoke and rubble, a camera spotted New York Mayor Rudolph Giuliani with his mask in his hand, trying to make it through the streets of his city moments after the second attack on the World Trade Center. An aide frantically tries to tell him he cannot go to City Hall. It's just too dangerous. Giuliani, as we know, is safe tonight, but like so many others, he says he too witnessed the horror of people frantically jumping from the windows of the burning World Trade Center. And now we can take a look at live pictures of New York at this hour. Late in the night, we understand that rescue workers are still at it, working very hard by the hundreds, perhaps even over 1,000 of them, trying to find those survivors that still may be close enough to be helped. And of course, by daybreak tomorrow, there'll be more, including those from our area who will be helping out with the operation.
In an era when carefully chosen sound bites and political spin are the norm, it was telling that most politicians nationwide, including our Governor Gary Locke, sounded just like the rest of us when they first learned of the attack.
I mean, it's gone. And how many thousands of people are in those buildings? How can this happen in America?
That's a question we've all been asking today. Access to the Capitol building was restricted in Olympia today. Tomorrow, Governor Locke and other state leaders are expected to attend a memorial service for the victims at the Puyallup Fair at 11 a.m.
All day long, we've heard this act of terrorism compared with the attack on Pearl Harbor 60 years ago. The same element of surprise and a staggering number of casualties. But hear what Pearl Harbor survivors just told KIRO 7 Eyewitness News reporter Chris Lagares.
It seems so ironic on this day when Pearl Harbor survivors in Washington gathered to remember one of their leaders, Bob Graves. TV screens were filled with images of another deadly surprise attack on the United States.
It was so surreal. It couldn't be happening, and it was.
I seen the people diving out of the windows as the building was going down and everything else. Yeah. It reminded me of USS Utah at Pearl Harbor.
These veterans of the last World War couldn't help but notice the similarities.
Surprise. A sneak. They call it Pearl Harbor surprise attack. It's a sneak attack.
And the differences.
Years ago, I had a better chance of surviving than what those people had.
It's just like Pearl Harbor. It was a terrible thing that happened there, but we knew who it was, so we turned around and went after them. But this here, we don't know who yet, who is the cause or who were the ones that instigated this whole thing.
The Pearl Harbor survivors were angry back then, and they are angry now.
We're all kind of up in arms over it. We'd like to see retaliation immediately.
And they are disappointed, too, that the lessons of Pearl Harbor on being vigilant and being prepared still haven't been learned.
We're vulnerable.
I don't think you can be vigilant on that magnitude. I really don't. I just don't think we're capable of it. The country's too immense. We've got too many places where they get hit.
In Snoqualmie, Chris Lagares, KIRO 7 Eyewitness News.
America's heartland is home to one of the nation's largest communities of Arab Americans. And tonight in Dearborn, Michigan, one of that community's leaders is urging restraint among his fellow Americans, not to rush to judgment.
Sometimes people think, that when a terrorist attack happens, we should rush to the Arab community to ask their opinion, and always remember Oklahoma. We don't know who did it. We don't know who did it. We're paying a lot of money for those intelligence services. Our tax dollars are going in billions to finance our intelligence services and apparatus, and I think we should let them do the job.
Osama Siblani says the intensity and scale of the destruction we've all witnessed is just as hurtful for Arab Americans as it is for everybody else.